Hi, uh, I just want to share with you guys how for those who don't have a cutting machine, this is a good video tutorial for you. So, the best file that you can get if you don't have any cutting machine is PDF. PDF file, it's printable and you can print it on your own convenience, but I would recommend that you would uh, print it in a thicker paper. Like instead of just using 65 pounds, use an 80 to 100 pounds. So here I'm gonna show you the list of supplies that I'm gonna be using uh, on how to assemble petal number 3 without any cutting machine. So first of all, you need to have your cardstock of choice. So it depends on what sizes you want to make. Will depend also on how many petals or how many sheets of paper you're going to need. So for this tutorial, I'm using red. And also, I have another cardstock, one sheet, and I split it in two, which I'm gonna be using for the center. And I'm gonna set this one aside first. And when you buy, let's back up. Let's have this one later. Let's deal this one later. I'll show you the other supplies. So of course you need to have a hot glue gun and your glue stick and your scissors, and I use the dowel rods to curl the sides of my petals. You'll need this. I have 4 different sizes here, so let's set this one aside too. And of course the pencil, because we're going to use this on tracing our petals. And here, when you buy templates from the Crafty Sagittarius on PDF or SVG, it comes mostly of the flower comes in 6 different sizes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you can really adjust, on what size of flowers you are going to make. So the same thing with the bases. I have 2 different base here. I have the round and the hexagon. So for a beginner, I would recommend to use the hexagon because it's easy. But I would also recommend to have the round base once you get, very familiar with it. So also, I forgot to mention that for the base, I would recommend to use a cardboard. I got this one from the Dollar Tree. I think it's 99 cents for 2 pieces. So this is typically the base that I use. Base matter, by the way. The thicker your base, the more sturdy your flower gets. So instead of just making a cardstock for the base, I try my hardest to really find a thicker one like this cardboard that I got from the Dollar Tree. So let's try to get to know our templates even more. So on the bases, it's pretty straightforward. You can see that there's small, medium, and then large. So basically, if you're going to make a large flower, you'll use this. If you're going to make medium flower, you use this, or the small flower with this. Same goes with the hexagonal base. If you want to make small, here's the small. If you want to make medium, here's the medium. If you want to make large, here's the large. But the petals, it has 6 different sizes. So now you'll be asking, what would you use if you're going to make a large flower? So I would recommend, if you're going to make a large flower, we would use petal number 1 or A. In some petals, I label it as A, B, C, D, or E. So number 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. That's what the large flower would use. Those are the templates that you are going to use. But since the first petal and the second petal are both laid out on a whole sheet of paper, like so, and then you cannot add any more petals on here, or maybe you can distort it a little bit and you can add a smaller one. So if you are trying to make a large flower and you want to save paper, what I am suggesting, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you'll go with 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's it. It can still make a large flower. Or, as I said earlier, if you want a larger one, basically it would only differ like 2 inches after finish. Yeah, 2 inches of flowers, and you will save at least 6 sheets of paper. So it depends upon on you. So that's how that's my preference when you are making the large flower. What about if you are making the medium? My preference on medium, I would use petal number 3, number 4, and number 5, or C, D, E. What about if I'm making a small flower? If I'm making small flower, I would use 5 and 6, and of course the small bases. So let's start making our flowers. So let's try just using the 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So in every one thing that I want to share with you in this video tutorial on how you can save time. This is my trick on how I do mine faster. So like for example, in one flower, I already know that each layer has 6 petals on it. So the way how I do it, I only trace 2 sheets in every layer, so that it would be faster and cleaner also. You don't have to have lots of traces of pencil on your paper. So our aim here is to make a large flower, and also at the same time try to minimize the use of paper. So what I am doing here, I'm distorting the largest petal, which is the number 2. I lay it out this way so that I would have enough space that I can, let's see if I can sneak this one. Yeah, I can sneak the larger flower. Or let's see if I can even sneak this one, the larger one. No, too tight. So it depends upon on you on how you are going to lay it out on your paper. But for me, I'm up into, you know, saving paper, especially when the cardstock gets really expensive. Like if there's no sale, I really would hate to have wasted cardstock. So this is my one, and This is my two. So these are the two templates that I'm tracing right now. And this one also. So in each flower, you need to have two, especially with this design, not unless it's like roses. But mostly of my flower, especially when in my sizing, it indicates that it uses 6 petals per layer. This is the way how I do it. And majority of it is this way. So we have already 2 traces of this pattern, the 2. I'm gonna set this aside so that I won't get confused. Now I will be working with these 3 remaining petals. So what I am trying to achieve here is trying to fit all the 3 petals in one sheet. I would really be very happy if it will. So I think it will. Very good. So that way, in one large flower with 5 layers of petals, you would only use 12 sheets of paper. So not bad at all for a large flower. Because mostly when you are making, if we did use the larger petal, I'm sure that we would use, instead of 12, we would use 18 sheets. So if you have that much cardstock, you know, and you have the freedom to spend that extra 6 petals, it's really up to you. So 1 and 1 more. So basically, when you are making, as I said earlier, when you are making one flower with this design or similar design as this, one flower you would only trace 2 sheets in every sizes. So basically, if you are going to make 5 flowers with the same design and the same size, basically you would only trace 10 sheets per size. So let's set this aside. And about tracing, I would recommend to use this pen. It's like a 0.77 big. It's very light and it wouldn't leave a harsh trace on your cardstock, so you don't really have to, you know, erase it one by one just to make it invisible. So here we go. So we have 2 traces of each size here, and let's set this one aside for now. What I'm going to do is also trace the large base. Since this video is for beginners, I'm gonna trace it a hexagonal. I'm gonna trace a hexagonal base on my cardstock, on my cardboard, so that this will become our base for this tutorial. So once you've done that, set aside this one, and now I'm gonna show you how I do mine. So first off, this one sheet that you traced, you'll put 2 empty sheets on it, like so. Set it aside, and then 1 sheet with trace, 2 empty sheets at the back of it. The same thing with the remaining sheets. So 1 trace and 2 empty. 1 trace and 2 empty. 2 empty sheets. So that way we can cut our templates or our petals quickly. So it's like you are cutting 3 sheets at a time instead of cutting 1. And also we are only tracing 2 sheets instead of 6. So if you are even, you know, making multiple flowers with the same design, and the cardstock that you use is light, like 65 pounds, you can even cut 4 sheets at a time to make it even faster. So it depends also on how your scissors would respond to the thickness of your cardstock. So done. So our first trace of these sizes is done. Now we're going to our second and last trace, which has 2 empty sheets at the back, and we're cutting 3 sheets at a time. Two. So our first sizes is done. Let's take care of it later. Let's proceed to our second sizes. We have 2 traces here. For me, especially when I have a project that has a very tight timetable, I would prefer to do the tracing and cutting rather than doing it in a machine, because in tracing and cutting I can cut 3 sheets at a time. However, in a cutting machine you can only cut 1 sheet at a time. I know this video would take long, but especially for the beginner, you know, when I was a beginner myself, how I really wish somebody, uh, you know, taught me the really step by step guide on how to make paper flowers. Although I have already, you know, like idea on how to make this, but a step by step guide will also be helpful, like a refresher. Not that you have to figure things out all by your own. So we're down to our last trace here. So I'm trying to make this as fast as, you know, understandable as I can. So one last piece, one last petal, the tiniest one. By the way, the dowel rods that I use for curling, I got mine from Michael's, I believe. Michael's and Lowe's. These are dowel rods. So now that all our petals are finished cutting, let's also cut our base before clearing up our table. So now we have our base. Let's clear our table so that we can assemble the flowers. So we have all our five layers here, and as you can see, some of the petals, you can still see the traces of the pencil. What I would recommend is that after tracing it, flip it upside down like so. So you won't see any trace at all. You don't have to erase it one by one. No one would sneak at the back of your paper flowers and see if there's a pencil mark anyway. As long as it's not very visible in front. So now guys, we have our 5 layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of 6 petals each. And we have also our base. What we're going to do now, particularly this petal design, especially if it has a pointed tip, the general rule for me is really to just all 6 of them, I just fold it in half like so to create like a texture on your petal. So let's do all 5 sizes. So just folding it in half, all 6 of it. I don't fold one at a time. It's very time consuming. Anyway, it's gonna be, you know, almost the same as folding it one by one. So just press it. Like so. That's our 4th layer, and down to our 5th and last. So now that we created like a texture at the middle of our petals, what we're going to do now is create a slit at the middle of our petal. And principal law for me in making paper flowers, the largest petal has the deepest slit. As you go smaller, you also make your slit shallower. Like so. Three. So I'm cutting 6 sheets at a time. 4 and 5. So all 5 layers has now slits. So what we're going to do now is to curl the sides. So in curling, the magic number for me is 3 sheets at a time. So as I said, with this petal design or similar petal that has a pointy and a wider side, I always fold it in half and then curl the sides outward. So because this is the largest petal, I'm also using the largest dowel rod on this set. So that's our first layer. To our second layer, because this is a smaller petal, I'm using a smaller dowel rod. So if you have, like, as I said, more flowers with the same design and the same size that you're making, you know, just like cutting it, curling it can also be done in 4 pieces, especially if you're only using 65 pounds paper. So down to our third layer. Imagine if you are curling this one at a time. How awful is that? It will take lots of your time. So we are now in our third layer. And to our fourth. With the third and fourth layer, I'm using the same size dowel rod. And our fifth layer, I'm using the smallest dowel rod that I have. So when you get familiar with curling the petals, you would have a feel, you know, which dowel rod to use. But as I said, the larger the petal, the larger also the dowel rod that you're going to use. So now that we curl all our petals together, we need to glue the flaps of each of our petals. So gluing the flaps is the reason why there is a dimension on your paper flower. So gluing it together now. 1, 2, 3. 1 second, let me just see if I am on frame. I believe I am. Four, 5, and 6. So there goes our first layer. Moving on to our second layer. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So to our third layer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So to our fourth layer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, and 6. So down to our 5th layer. One, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we are now done gluing the flaps of our petals. Before we proceed on assembling it in our base, let's proceed on how to make a flappy center without cutting machine. So I want to make the center first so that I would know how big the center would be and how much space should I leave on our base when we glue our petals into it. So as I said, I have two portions of the whole entire 8.5 by 11 cardstock. I cut it in half, and what I do is fold it in half again, like this, both of it. And just one piece of your half, fold at least half of an inch at the bottom part. So this is gonna be your guide when you are cutting fringe on your center. So what I do is just even it out together and hold it tight using your scissors. Cut fringes into this one until the line here, until you finish the entire thing. So I already cut this one to save time. What we're going to do now is after we cut it all, let's try to soften the edges here. And that's our folding line, right? Let's try to fold it in the opposite so that it would create volume and glue the end together. See the volume that I mean? Compared to this one, there's really nothing. So it would make your center less fluffy if you will not invertedly fold it. So once it's done, we can now create a center by rolling this, and this side is crucial that it should be securely glued. So have, you know, some glue as you go rolling your center. So you already have your first layer. Let's do the other one to make it fuller. Again, soften the crease a little bit. And be careful. Just massage it according to, you know, the line of fringe that you made. And then once it's done, softly reverse folding it and glue the edges together. Like so. And continue gluing it to where you end up earlier. And roll it. And then once you've done that, you can then fly out your center out. So if you want to have, you know, if you want to make it fuller, you can go ahead and add 2 more of the flaps of this center. But since I'm going to make 5 layers of petals, we're not going to do that. So let's set aside, so we know that at least we should have this much center that we should leave on our base to cover, or a smaller one would be better. So here comes the base. One thing I forgot to mention earlier too, like for example, you want to hang your flower. This is what I can recommend you. This is more sturdy than, you know, regular wire. A regular wire, when you put glue in it, it would slip. However, because of the fuzz on this pipe cleaner, it would hold the hot glue on your flower. Also, this is more sturdy than a string. So this is what I highly recommended on what you're going to use in hanging your flower. So this is just a quarter of the strip. I bend it like a hook, and what we're going to do now is to squeeze some glue and attach it to your base before you start gluing your petals. So what we're going to do now, let's start with this one, with the largest petal. Let's only glue half, put a glue on half of the surface of our base, and then glue it on one side of your hexagon. as center as you can. The next one should be on the opposite. Again, we're only gluing half on the base, and we are placing it the exact opposite. Why we are keeping this one open? Because we are going to create like one petal atop of each other type of arrangement. So that way, you know, we can achieve that. So 3, and then 4. Actually, we don't really need to do that because our base is large enough. What we can just do is to secure it, secure the sides of the 2 new ones, and have the glue and align the base of your petal according to the line of your base here. So secure the open lines. So that's our first layer. Onto our second layer. So the same thing as how we did it earlier. The first layer, the first petal should be in between 2 previous petals, and the second petal should be on its complete opposite. So we are placing the petals on a staggered arrangement. So this is our third petal on this layer. And then to our fourth. And then fifth, and sixth. So to our third layer, again in a staggered arrangement, we should place the new petals in between the 2 previous ones. So we're moving inward now towards our base because we need to cover this white spot here. Or if we cannot completely cover it, I have a trick that I'm gonna show you. So that's the fourth. And then the fifth. final petal for this layer. Moving on to our fourth layer, the same thing, staggered arrangement, so it would create volume and body to your flower. Moving inward, but still in staggered way. And the same thing, second petal should be on the opposite of your first. So third, fourth, fifth, and then the sixth. So down to our final layer. Here's our fifth layer. So one, two, three, four, five, and finally our last petal, 6. So when we put our center there, you can still see visibly this area that's white. So the remedy for that is, I already threw my cutouts. So basically, if you still have some portions in it that you can use, I would use it. So let's just cut around piece like this. I think our small base template is exactly what I needed. So let's just trace it. So there are two remedies that you can do in case that you come up with this kind of problem. It's either you're going to do a cutout like this, or you are going to increase the volume of your flappy center, as I mentioned earlier. You can add 2 more layers so that you can create this flappy center larger than it is right now. So, or you can do the easy part, just do the cutout like so, enough to cover the entire white area of your base, and have some glue and cover the entire thing. So even though this is not fluffy enough, you won't visibly see any white portion of your base there. So generously squeeze some glue, especially when you are using flappy centers. I would recommend to really be heavy on glue, because it's also a heavy center, not like the flat one. And before you even attempt to take a hold on it or wiggle it, give it some good number of seconds before it completely dries out. So here you go, guys. This is how you are going to assemble a paper flower without a cutting machine using the Crafty Sagittarius PDF paper flower templates. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.